Find me. Those words haunted Melinda Ellison on a regular basis. For most of her life, she had been what some would call gifted. Not in the sense that she could tell the future, but because she had been the sole reason for the solving of numerous deaths. It had started when she hit puberty. Her mother told her that she had come into her own, and that Melinda held a special light. Melinda was only 12, and her mother's words had been confusing to her. Special light. Melinda saw herself as a typical preteen, thinking of boys, her softball team, and keeping up her grades in school. However, that light began to burn brighter and brighter every single night. Her first experience was terrifying. She had just gone to bed, snuggling under the covers and holding on to her favorite toy, the teddy bear that she had had for years. As she drifted off into a blissful, deep sleep, she had no idea that her life was about to change forever. "Find me," the voice had said. The dreams showed a blanket of white, ice, and thick frost covering everything around her. As far as she could see, there was no color, only the thick, hard, frozen substance. She tried to move, but found herself boxed in. The walls seemed to be closing in on her, and as she pushed against them, her fingertips felt like they were immediately plagued with frostbite. Melinda took a small step back and felt herself falling over a large object. It, too, was covered in thick frost and ice, and as she tried to brace herself, she realized it was a person. A woman. She felt her heart began to race, seeing the woman's face frozen in fear. Her skin was like marble, with a blushing tint on her lips, her eyes open, staring up at Melinda. The freezing temperature began to take its toll, and Melinda could feel herself coming closer and closer to the same fate as the woman before her. Suddenly, the woman's head turned with a jerk, and her lips parted. "Find me." Melinda awoke with a start and screamed, massive chills streaming over her body. Her skin was cold as ice, and she couldn't control the horrible shivering as she remembered her dream. Her mother threw open her bedroom door and hurried to her side. She wrapped her arms around Melinda, trying to bring warmth back into her body. It was just 2 days later when Melinda had seen something about a missing woman, and the face she saw made her blood run cold. It was her, the woman in her dream. She wanted to go to the police, to anyone who would listen, but being only 12 years old, she was afraid that no one would take her seriously. It was her mother that drove her to the station. What if I'm crazy, or they think I have something to do with the disappearance? Melinda's mother, Sherry, smiled warmly at her. "I'll be right there with you, Mel. Just remember, you're trying to help bring closure to their family." Melinda had told her mother everything, every detail about her dreams, and sighed in relief when she responded with her belief. She explained that her gift had made itself known, that it had run in their family for generations. "You've been chosen, Mel, just like your grandmother." "Nana had dreams about dead people?" Melinda asked. "Why didn't anyone ever tell me? I'd hoped it would skip over you, spare you in a way. I can see I was wrong. But don't worry, baby girl. I'll always be with you in this." Melinda sat at the detective's desk, hands shaking as she began to tell them what she knew. Frozen? A woman's body in a frozen box. Detective Tripp raised an eyebrow. "Not just a woman, it was her, the missing woman." Melinda spoke timidly, knowing he probably thought she was off her rocker. "It was then when his phone rang, and as he carried on the conversation, his tone began to change. He stared at Melinda, eyes narrowing in concern. "Did any of her friends or family have a large freezer?" His face lost its color as he listened to the answer. Melinda dropped her head and sighed. "Really?" Tripp responded. "Thank you, I'll meet you there." Detective Tripp ended the call and stood. "Well, young lady, it seems your dreams have given us another route to check. Thanks for coming in." Sherry and Melinda rode home in silence, neither of them knowing exactly what to say. It was the next day when Melinda's mother got the call from the detective. They had found the woman, Tammy Jones, murdered and thrown into her uncle's walk-in freezer. The uncle, a butcher, had caught wind of a family member's will, and because they were leaving a large sum of money to Tammy instead of him, he figured he had to get rid of her. Thanks to Melinda, he'd been caught and charged with first-degree murder. That was 8 years ago. Since the beginning of her prophetic dreams, she had assisted in several cases. Detective Tripp had become a father figure, even developing a relationship with Melinda's mother. Melinda hadn't had a dream in 3 weeks now, and she welcomed the peacefulness of her sleep. It didn't last long, though. "Find me." Melinda stood in the woods, her hands caked with dirt, fingernails jagged and broken. She heard the familiar phrase and looked around to see a man of about 40 standing at the entrance of a massive hole. As Melinda took a step towards him, she could see a gaping wound in his chest that bled profusely. The man flung himself head first into the deep abyss, and Melinda shrieked in fear as she watched him disappear into thin air. As she awoke, she clutched at her chest, a fiery pain tearing through her body. She knew what it meant. This man had been shot and then disposed of in the woods. She tried desperately to recall every detail of the wooded area. Then she put in a call to Detective Tripp. "Seems you're on a roll," he said with a grin. "We've been trying to solve that missing persons case for a week now." Melinda smiled back. "Glad I could help." The man, Scott Smith, had been on a hunting trip with Marty Tyson, his best friend since high school, and it was discovered that they had been seeing Martin's wife for quite some time. That led to a tremendous argument and eventually to his untimely death. Melinda was used to restless nights, the victims begging to be found. The only drawback, she thought, was the pain she felt. She relieved their fears and every wound they had sustained. The symptoms were never lasting, very long at least, but long enough for Melinda to know exactly what the victims had gone through. Within a week, she began to dream of the sounds of crackling wood. No one spoke to her, but she would wake up coughing, even smelling noxious smoke. She'd had regular dreams before, so it wasn't that much of a surprise to her. But this was so real, so vivid. Was it a warning? Was Melinda the one in danger now? She began to inspect her smoke detectors, changing batteries if needed, and even bought 2 small fire extinguishers for her bedroom and kitchen. The reoccurring dreams became more intense in time. Still no victim, no one calling for help, and it unnerved Melinda. She hated living in fear, especially the fear of the unknown. She had learned at a young age to face her fears head on, but in this case, she had no idea what she was up against. Finally, after a long day of work, Melinda fell into bed, quickly drifting off into a deep sleep. Then she heard those words, "Find me." Immediately, Melinda found herself lying next to a young girl, in what seemed to be a small, dark metal box. A coffin, she wondered? No, too hollow sounding. Her hands touched the girl's lifeless body, feeling the blood that had poured from her neck. Melinda began kicking at the sides of the box, harder and harder, until the top sprang open. She was in the trunk of a car in an old junkyard. The girl appeared to be 16, maybe 18 years old. Her light brown hair was matted with blood, her eyes bruised and swollen shut. The poor girl had been beaten and murdered. A raspy voice escaped the girl's lips. "Find me." With a jolt, Melinda shot up from her bed, holding her throat and suppressing a scream. She immediately grabbed her phone and began making notes, typing out details so she could recall them. Her main thought was how young this girl was. Who was she? Not even old enough to have really experienced life, and it broke Melinda's heart. She put a call in to Detective Tripp, replaying everything down to the smallest detail. Whoever murdered this girl, she wanted them caught and charged. There was only 3 junkyards in town, and after the first 2 were searched and cleared, Melinda begged Tripp to let her come with him to search the final yard. "I'll know what to look for," she said. "Please, let me help you put her to rest." Tripp reluctantly agreed and allowed Melinda to ride with him to the site. As they arrived, Melinda could see mounds of destroyed and damaged cars and trucks of all sizes. They towered over them, lined up in a maze of twists and turns, while littering the ground with pieces of broken plastic and shattered glass. "What kind of vehicle?" Tripp asked as they wandered the yard. Melinda closed her eyes and brought it back to the dream. "It's an old Impala, maybe a 76, gray, 2-door, she said. "She's in the trunk. I know she is." After speaking with the yard manager, he checked his own records, but couldn't locate the type of vehicle. Melinda was adamant that the car was there, and she felt her temper rise within her. "What about your employees? How hard would it be for one of them to bring in a junked car without anyone knowing?" she asked practically, as she yelled at the bald man. Tripp placed a hand on her shoulder. The yard manager tilted his head and shrugged. "People come in here all the time. I suppose it's possible that Danny or Robert could have brought in some inventory. You're more than welcome to look around, but I doubt you'll find what you're looking for." Even before he stopped speaking, Melinda began working towards a large pile of cars that were being fed into a crusher. The young girl was in there somewhere. Melinda could feel it. "Detective, over here!" Melinda was running now, heading to the trunk of the Impala, and also catching the eye of one of the junkyard employees. He was manning the crusher, feeding the destroyed cars into a gigantic mouth of the machine, and watching them as they turned them into flattened pieces of twisted metal. As he saw Melinda heading towards the trunk, he jumped up from his position and began to run to the front gate. Tripp noticed his movement and called for help on his radio. Melinda reached the car, her eyes resting on the bloodstains, now the color of rust. The smell of death became increasingly strong as she stood there. Tripp looked in the front of the car, looking for a trunk release, but found none. He knew it needed a key, but found a large crowbar instead. When the trunk was opened, Melinda let out an uncontrollable sob as she became overwhelmed with emotion. The girl's face was unrecognizable from the beating, and the wounds around her neck had almost completely decapitated her. "She can rest now," Melinda said through tears. "Don't let him get away with this. You get her the justice she deserves." Tripp wrapped an arm around Melinda and nodded. His radio clicked as officers checked in with him, letting him know that Daniel Rivers had been captured. The victim had been his girlfriend, Jessica Dole, and Daniel had become overly jealous when she'd been talking with one of his guy friends. When she returned home, she longed to talk to her mother. Her mom's phone rang until it went to voicemail, so she left a message asking her mom to call her back. After grabbing some dinner and a hot bath, Melinda settled back on the couch, watching a horror film before bed. She felt herself dozing and was immediately hit with the smell of smoke, the crackling and creaking of burning wood, and the strong spasm of a cough. Melinda was in the middle of the fire. She could feel the flames licking at her skin, and she cried out in pain. Her lungs burned in her chest, her eyes watered as she felt herself giving in to death. As the building began to collapse, Melinda flailed her arms above her head and rolled onto the ground. She felt herself land on her living room floor, and she sobbed. She was home. She was safe. It was just a dream. A very realistic nightmare, she told herself. Melinda picked up her phone and once again dialed her mother's number. Voicemail. Glancing at the time, Melinda inwardly cringed. It was 2 a.m. "Hey, Mom, I just wanted to check in with you. Sorry about the time, but I can't sleep. Call me back. I love you." She ended the call and pulled herself off the couch and down the hall towards her bedroom. She began to think back to the past few days. When was the last time she had talked to her mom? Saturday? Sunday? It was rare that they didn't talk every day, and it was Thursday now. Something was very wrong. She fought the urge to call Detective Tripp, instead texting him, expressing her concern. David Tripp and her mother were a serious item, but they still lived apart. David's career was a top priority, and Sherry had respected that. They were there for each other, but also gave space when needed. Melinda curled up with Teddy, the bear that had been there on the first night of her gift, his ratty fur thin from age. She gave a silent prayer that her mother was all right, and forced herself to close her eyes. The morning light was barely begun, peeking through the blinds, when Melinda heard her phone ring. Finally, she thought. Took you long enough. Are you okay? She hadn't even bothered checking who it was, just assumed it was her mom. Mel? David's voice sounded strained. "Oh, hi, Dave. Guess you got my text. Have you heard from Mom?" David let out a sigh. "No, not since Friday. She'd mentioned something about going to the lake with her Aunt Julie for the weekend. Did she not tell you?" Melinda felt herself getting ruffled. Julie hasn't talked to me since the dream started years ago. And the lake, I wouldn't even know where to begin to find where she was staying. No, she didn't tell me. I guess she thought I had too much on my plate. Maybe she can't get phone service, but wait, it's been a week and still no word. Don't you think we need to find her? Immediately as she spoke those words, Melinda felt ice flowing through her veins. "Find me," she whispered. "Oh no, David, please. Something isn't right. Please help me get in touch with my mother." "Have you had any dreams lately about your mom?" Melinda shook her head and answered, "No." "Good. That's good. I'll get started. And Melinda, I do love her. If you hear from her before I do, please let me know." Thursday evening, Melinda found herself no closer than she had been that morning. Her laptop set open, the People Finder listings all the Julia James living in the state. There were hundreds. Why couldn't I have gotten the number from Mom? She asked her stuffed bear. He didn't answer, just looked at her with his brown and black eyes. Her own eyes were getting heavy, sleep begging for her attention. She took a hot shower and curled up on her bed, and after a deep breath, Melinda was walking down a dirt road, an old wooden sign to her right. Traveler's Wood by Lay Lake. Melinda let her feet guide her towards a small cabin, with an old boat floating in the water. The lapping sound filled her ears, while the rising smoke began filling her eyes and nose. She ran inside, the cabin now becoming engulfed in flames. The front room was empty, save for a cell phone that was laying on the floor. It was her mother's. Melinda couldn't speak from the smoke that terrorized her lungs, her tears streaming down her face. She crawled on the floor towards the bedroom, and her heart fell like it had dropped into her stomach. The badly charred remains of a body lay in the hallway, and Melinda cried out as loud as she could. Then she heard the words as her mother slowly turned her head towards her. "Mel, please, find me."
Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague,
Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's show. If you think you might like a little more spooky in your life, then please feel free to click on one of the videos we have up here. Maybe look at one of the playlists if you're trying to get caught up. I know, there's so many videos on the channel. There's so many series that are going at the same time. Sometimes you just need a little refresher course, and I gotta say, I always enjoy the views. If you're not subscribed, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Maybe hit the bell so you don't miss anything. We upload a lot on this channel, so you won't want to miss a single story as they come out. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click on the Amazon link down there. There's quite a few books in my Amazon account. You can have a look, and if you'd like a signed copy, get up with me through email, and I'll be happy to work something out with you. Also, there's links to my Patreon, and you can become a member on the channel if you'd like your spooky a little bit early. Patrons and members on the $5 tier get their videos 12 hours early. That's in the morning as opposed to in the evening. Patrons at the $10 level also get a signed copy of my book anytime I write one. Speaking of my patrons, you should see them appearing right now. Just wanted to take a minute to say how much I appreciate all of you. Patrons, subscribers, however you give to the channel. I really appreciate everything you do, and it truly touches me that you have chosen to support the channel in this way. Well, that's enough for now. Till next time, Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.